Okay, Chinese translator, please speak in your channel. Unmute yourself, unmute yourself, unmute your Chinese interpreter, unmute yourself, please, and then speak to your channel.
הוא אומר שהוא לא יכול unmute himself.
Okay, now, can you please now? Hello. Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that go to Nandigiwa.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us again. We will now continue with the teaching. Thank you everyone. Rinpoche, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so parties semgentally chowa kare yunguyome kabari yoris tindiji sungudwa di nyingje wi madras samsara jido o ji ditar parmatu pungo te ngal jugal dena te anaba ni sungyute ni kanshina sonam da mendemba da sonam chembo da demba kaimbo sonam da mendemba kaimba tene number tobe semjun korala yata sornandruti o yul tonga kyobana dinyam do semdes ting dani lungda tawada nammugoda tamam nammugoda singidi sarudro gejain sare o to korang na shaya charam babata kyu mongbu chajoda mongbu tudobgi neba chabatas ta mongbu chigi to chita tayung be soruchi o ngamdaro chi ile alangi yo soruchi mongbu tudobgi neba chabata chabar kyurto shi jik신라고 깨네스 강당 감라지기 토네 아니 딱 감라 깨부터 손남다 데보다 민데면 이가로 감라 깨다 지과래 다파 텔레야 유튜브텔라 이니 개발도와 짜이 김다 로메 김다 지중 엠발라 주버 차오 야나 리다 나두고다 저부도 주버 차오스 다 티타 패천 잠래 텔라 소바 다 나나서 용비에 임래 다드네 소놈단 nem바티 소놈 첨보단 nem바티 남라 깨단 대기다 지바 임바체 지 사루베 소로 차바베 소로 교 모부자조지 미모부 투도 근나바 제바 소로 딘데지 예바 간시 찍라 에네 디 지달리 깨네 칸바 징메 띵도 지바다스 다 칸지 톰볼이야 지바다고 양도 톰볼이야 지바다고 에네 하이 샤멘 칸도 주바다고 에네 지 치상볼 두번도 어 텔라 소베 에네 두셰 남만나서 기레스네 어 딘데지도와 어다 마이가도 주베 갑레 이나야 에네 지 칸달 담보딜라 지 남라 지기 토네 에네 남라 지다 지기 토네 다 칸다 란체버 점부터 당진디 슈크처를 지 두이 기르와 에네 텔라야 지 네다 에네 땡리야 ngombar shimbe gone tida nela ngonde shin saru ji otus chene ane 지다 착승글로지 뭔도 균네 안 맞도 주도 레스 어떤데 숨도와 다디 남유 나wan데 용구여 세티 팅사 지 지소고 나는 루유마 담는다 투제 나리야 틴데 용구도와 베트로 직 차샤베나 mingashe te ben ngara ya ngoshi ba tu nyo puli tsenyechi ta puli gi gande tuche traji gande ya tus pulma sadra dre ot duche puli chi ma yuya chi ba o ta tinde chi tsemu tsenyechi gi pope poguchi ani kondu tsemu tsene ani ya deresin puli ya yuba kaptere ya ko tajalo ma chi sabda tajalo ma chi sa ngod chi tabai mada an dabi yumbe kaple ya chambati thori mada chambati thori yumbe kap chamba nyamje ta tiche yindi ani korang ya mitise ta chamba soya tondala pangogane uktuso tendedese pangogan ma chi neme chi do utaya yoya da tende thol ani khalia pujaru ji yudwa o tende chebe kaple ya ku namshi ti an beti ti gangi yengi 진짜집에 저보다 애는 사자다 도서관 참만 통대봐 수수 풍부등이야 통대봐 도스체 중송스 현다 파르샤네 만냄 캔대야 엔 도스 냄되기요 텐데지 다 통대봐 텐데도 중송스 텐데라고도 와다 남시디 칠로지 누구여봐 테네 양수 남시디 텔수지 슈가여봐 디서로 텐데데 잠불 루규 망고래 엔 푸팅 rumbo tinde nane pa jing rugu yoba sonro tene ya ji putung rumbo jing chu yungu yoba sonro o tinde jing na chamba se sa ro o tinde luju na mambo yungu do wa o ta tinna shi ji cho na cho ji to ne mai ma de jugu res sungu yore.
Next, the sutra talks about the different appearances that the intermediate state being might have when entering the womb, depending on the level of merit of that person. So it is said that a person.
Now, yes, thank you.
So it is said that when a person of little merit enters the womb, that person has essentially there's fright, there is fear and apprehension involved. Yeah, so that person might have the appearance of being like chased, for example. Yeah, so that person might hear clamorous noises. The person might have a sense of entering into a marsh, a dark forest, or the like. Yeah. Then, as for a person who's accustomed to good deeds, who has a merit, that person enters the womb also with a sense of fear and apprehension, just like a person of little merit. But that person will have different appearances. For example, it is said that this person of merit might hear peaceful and pleasant sounds. He has the sense of entering into going inside a nice house and so forth. Yeah. So, but whatever the case, whether the person is of little merit or the person has some merit, one enters the womb with some kind of fear and apprehension, and I think this is very likely due to a very strong sense of self-grasping and self-cherishing, isn't it? And with that, of course, then there is attachment involved as well. Yeah. So there are many accounts that you hear in this world that can be likened to the experience of the consciousness entering the womb. So, for example, I met this basketball player. So during when he was during one of his games, he fell and he hit his head on the floor, and he lost consciousness. And of course, right away, the medical personnel performed CPR on him. They tried to resuscitate him, isn't it? So he told me that at that time, he saw himself outside of his body. He was kind of like floating above the body. He could see his own body. He could see the person who was performing CPR on him. He could see, his friends and other people. They are kind of gathered around, isn't it? Right. So, but then subsequently, he regained consciousness. He had a feeling of like kind of going back into his body. So, and there are many, I'm sure there are many of such accounts, stories you hear in this world. Yeah? So I think these stories are probably a kind of like a way of describing maybe also how what the experience of entering into the womb is like.
משכן עמוס עצום לאין שיעור, שיושב על כס רם. אז ההבחנות האלה, המראות האלה, החזויות האלה, שונות ומשונות, עולות לה ברצף התודעה, וככה היא נכנסת לרחם אימה. אז בעצם כשאנחנו חושבים על התיאור הזה של הכניסה לרחם, בעצם עם הכניסה לרחם גם מלווה בפחד וחשש באימה שעולה בתודעה, בתלות בדברים האלה, אז בעצם התודעה עצמה היא נטועה בהוקרת העצמי ובאחיזה בעצמי. הם עולים בצורה חזקה, יש את האחזות החזקה במקום הלידה, בסוג הלידה וכו', שעולים ומתפתחים ברצף התודעה. אז פה יש, כמו שציינו, יש חזויות שונות ומשונות שמופיעות לתודעה בזמן הזה. זה כמו שיש כאלה שיש להם תיאורים שהם דומים למה שקורה להם ברגע המוות. הם מתו וחזרו בחזרה או חזרו לחיים, בוא נקרא לזה ככה. יש הרבה אנשים שיש להם איזשהו תיאור מסוים. לדוגמה, רימפוצ'ה שמע תיאור של מישהו שנפגע בקפיצה ממקום גבוה. אני חושב שזה התיאור של רימפוצ'ה, אני חושב שזה דמה לקפיצה של בנג'י. מישהו שעשה בנג'י, אז הוא נפל, ראשו נחבט באדמה והוא איבד את ההכרה. אלה שהיו סביבו ניסו להחיות אותו, אז עשו לו החייאה, הנשימו אותו, הביאו דיפיברילטור, מכשיר שנותן שוקים חשמליים. ובזמן הזה, בשלב הזה, הוא אמר שהתודעה שלו יצאה החוצה, והוא יכל לראות את כל מה שקורה סביבו, הוא ראה את הגוף שלו מוטל על הרצפה, הוא ראה את החברים שלו, את המכרים שלו נאספים סביבו, הוא ראה את תהליך ההחייאה וכו'. ולאחר מכן התודעה חזרה אל תוך הגוף, והוא חזר להכרה. אז אנחנו מכירים לפעמים גם תיאורים שכאלה. בואו ננסה עכשיו לחבר שוב את האוזניות שלי, נראה אם זה יעבוד. נחבר אוזניות אחרות. אני טועה אם זה עובד? אולי רגע, בואו נראה. אתם שומעים אותי?
שומעים קצת חלש, יפילה.
אוקיי, אז בואו רגע, נעשה את האוזניות הקודמות, נראה אם אני... מה אם עכשיו שומעים אותי?
Much better.
אוקיי. All right. Thank you. לעשות רימפוצ'ה.
다 마이마투 주축이 딱 나와 손놈다 대마도 손남인데발 소소설 나와 나조지 시작이 해다가 다 딘디지 배천지 순거도 와 대대네 여초를 쓴거도 다 근데 바도 디 기시 초영암수 제지 임배 차네 다 년주 벌시바지 용거래 덴주 벌시바지 용거래 년도를 깨야기 다 parsi tu deba chi yimba ina di ane chi ngaran sogi chi shabden tang ane chi jinju tsu gewa dune ane ting gyuwa dua yorwe ti gewa ting gyuwa yorwe gyuwa yor marwe sta tila ngomba kongogi kecha kebra yo imbare mindo ten chisawo sene ane kandu kingyurgi tene pemba chibichir undu sinju shatu chensene penjegi lechigi topgi ane sane selengi soyo tamne chudeba ane namingi dribu imba chigba imbe chane ane selengi soyo tamne nyandu kyawa penjegi lechi tat pena tundorobu chigi kyayagi ane selengi soyo tamne ane tundu parsibachi chudeba ina tat teta pemba chibe ane tundu kisigi lulemba di Bardo di Pazalala ya ane kyawa shingi tsam chene ji gene gyuru sayaji ta yongtaw yamares di ngomba ngomba zogi tawa de tende chi yimbare ta ngomba kundu tawa ro ji ya cha shaba ina ta tundu parsiba ji truchawa di ta tende penje ge le de tundu namingi phungo ji truchawa yimbache parsibi phungoji truchawa imbachi ta jinju namgi ta special lamna chogre ane ya rani tobgi gyawadruya yungurwa o tendechigi gewe nuba tujenchigi tobla tene ane parsibati tundu parsibati ane ko shabudundachi ne ta shabudundachi ne rinda chen shabudundachi tsetse chen yungu yorwa 단 샤부둔다치기 체제 rinda체네 아니 샤십주 시구 봐도 아니 기시 촌네 아니 기실레마도 샤십주 시구네 아니 녀바젠도 아니 기시 녀바젠도 랭고 렘베 켜그레스는 다데데 뭔가 공원이가 찍어봐 어다 된데 인도 샤부둔다치 아니 퍼시기 체제 rinda를 샤베 아니 퍼시지기 체제 존네 이 파시지 체제 마주 파라텔야 야지 덴드 나미기 풍고 펜제기 레기 아니 셋업 아니 파시 때야 아니야티 디부디 민정알 덴드 땡 나미기 풍고 펜제기 레지 툴 때네 아니 덴드 파시도 아니 유야여 되지 어 덴드 숨고 여인 바래 어 다티 케버 민다와치 여인 바래 또 케바 민다와 직송야티 잡로네 아니 직딱 게외 차발이야 준수다 디 느베 떡기 케바 주수치기 야와치 뭐뭐 공원이 맡으면 중으로 봐 그때마다 개미스 시험도
Okay.
There is the intermediate state of the bad migrations and the intermediate state of the happy migrations or good rebirth. So if a person is already in the intermediate state of a bad migration, can that state of existence be changed by prayers, pujas, and so forth? So there are two opinions on this, or two positions on this. So according to Vasubandhu's treasury of manifest knowledge, or what is also commonly referred to as the lower Abhidhamma, it is said that the intermediate state, once established, cannot be changed. So prior to entering the intermediate state, at the time of death, the link of craving and grasping come into being, and they nourish the seed of a previously accumulated projecting karma, isn't it? And when that seed when that's a specific karmic seed is activated, and then the person dies and enter into the intermediate state of bad migration, for example, Once the intermediate state is established, it cannot be changed whatsoever. So this is the position of the lower Abhidhamma. But according to Asanga's compendium of knowledge, or what is also referred to as the higher Abhidhamma or the Mahayana Abhidhamma, it is said that the intermediate state existence can be changed even after it is established. How? If very powerful virtue or merit is accumulated, it is said that the intermediate state existence can be changed. So it is both the lower and the higher Abhidhamma assert that once you are in the intermediate state, after 7 days, if you do not take rebirth, you will die and you are reborn again into another intermediate state. And this can go on up to a maximum. Basically, you can stay in the intermediate state for a maximum of 49 days. And within the 49 days, after every 7 days, if you have not taken rebirth, you will die in the intermediate state, and you take rebirth you take on an intermediate state again. But of course, according to the lower Abhidhamma, the intermediate state cannot be changed. In that, if you have died and you have entered into the intermediate state of bad migration, that you will always be the intermediate state of a bad migration. Whereas according to the Asanga's compendium of knowledge, let's say after the first 7 days you do not take rebirth, then you will die in the intermediate state, isn't it? So at the time of death, craving and grasping nourishes the seed of a previously accumulated virtuous projecting karma. Yeah? And when that is activated, then one is reborn and one acquires the intermediate state of a happy migratory being.
שני טקסטים האלה שהם עוסקים בידע, באבידרמה, הם תמימי דעים לגבי כך שאורך התקופה שבה אנחנו נמצאים בברדו בנויה משבועות, כל שבוע בין 7 ימים. אז הוא בנוי מסגמנטים, מקטעים של 7 ימים, המקסימום של כל קטע זה 7 ימים, שבו בסוף החיים של 7 ימים, אז מצב הברדו הזה נפסק, ואז עוד שבוע של ברדו יכול להתרחש, אם לידה לא התרחשה לפני כן. אז בעצם מה שקורה זה שהברדו מחפש סיטואציה או מקום לידה, במשך השבועות האלה, ומקסימום הוא יכול להישאר במצב הזה במשך 7 שבועות, זאת אומרת 49 יום. ככה שאם 49 יום עברו, 7 שבועות עברו, ומי שנמצא בברדו לא מצא את הלידה הספציפית, בסוף השבוע השביעי הוא בוודאות יגיע לקיום הלידה, הוא בוודאות ייוולד במצב מסוים. אבל כאן, כשאנחנו שואלים את עצמנו מה קורה באמצע, האם אפשר לשנות את מצב הלידה בזמן הזה? אז מאחר וכל מקטע בתוך הברדו של שבוע בנוי מאחר והברדו בנוי ממקטעים של שבוע, אז האבידרמה הגבוהה אומרת שאם עבר שבוע, ובמהלך השבוע הזה אנחנו עושים פוג'ות ותפילות עבור הנפטר, ואנחנו נושאים עבורם תפילות, והם בעצמם גם יצרו את הגורמים המתאימים, זה אומר virtue או פעולות חזקות שהן פעולות חיוביות, אז באמצעות זה במצב הברדו, אז אחרי שבוע הם יכולים להחליף או להתחלף, לעשות את השינוי הזה ממצב לידה עגום למצב לידה גבוה. זה אומר שבאמצעות התפילות והפוג'ט וכו' שאנחנו ניסה עבורם, וכמובן שבתלות בקרמה חיובית שהם צברו בעבר, אז פעולה משליחה שתשליך אותם, תוביל אותם למצב לידה טוב או נוח, תופעל, ואז בחיים הבאים הם ייוולדו במצב קיום נוח. האבידרמה הנמוכה אומרת שהדבר הזה לא אפשרי, ברגע שמצב הברדו מתרחש, אז הוא בוודאות הלידה שלאחר מכן תהיה תואמת למצב שבו אנחנו נולדנו בתוך הברדו. זה אומר שיש הבדלים בין ההסברים של מסורת האבידרמה, אבל ההבדלים הם בעצם נטויים, או הבדלים בין שתי הטקסטים האלה, לפחות לגבי הנקודה הזאת, הם עוסקים האם אפשר לעשות פוג'ות, האם יש לנו כוח או פוטנציאל שקשור גם בפעולות החיוביות שהנפטר הזה שמגיע לחיים הבאים עשה בעבר. הסולה.
다때네 양 규전 신다 송도와 그 디다르스 파르마티 풍보테 토말 코나가 또 슈바 가이 바테네 메르메고 셰차데스타 바드 남시티 마이가 닌자 자마타네 아니 다 타니 메르메고 따르따고 나나르고 사지기 타니지 요바 오코드네 또 메르메고 사지레스 다때 가르스나 파메 미장와다 deve says to the duvel tene lulember chegans then duve isare and ditar later the pame canamji social rankever micheki duve tudo lulember chebes ta padonamshi korangi jitel shumdu chigi lech sadne the shumdu chigi yodache ane pamegi ngalgi jigena so medaba kamgi zelo so be medaba de gente chasanji chandebache 다 디간이야 뉴베 투도 생시 다 뉴베 투도 생인데 베나 추이 두산로 메이 민산로 다 간다 중앙친구 시 누벌 때네 아니 다 뉴베 툴 때네 아니 림베 니레시네 아니 거야 폐용하지 고기업에 인자 뉴베 투도 불르려 맞지 그래스 디다테스 다 텔레 페지 숨제 베나 네기 난두 두시 쇼지 간샤베이나 아니 쇼레 마르마레 해 쇼레 이내야 기부 쪼와다스네 아니 미기 뚜뚜 따야기 다 미기 베조 갈레타스 탁발로 소발라 테니스 다야 중국이 지 탁발로 지 두스탄제 중국 탁베 두스코르제 어떤 데지 뚜뚜 따네 아니 가기 쇼레데 디나네 ene 마도도지 대용으로 봤어 타발라 소발라 때는 마르중아야스 게남레 미고 민규르키스 쇼크라 마르마레스 미조데 마마르바스 마레티 디기 다 핀준 체베기 뉴베도 다 뚜루tam베 뉴발라 때네 엔 뉴베 툴레 마르중아요가 대신두스 메르메베르기야 대신노스 주단 깽기 투 나도 룽어버르고 주로스 다 간다 나이 루세기 통메 주시 루테야 밤에제 드라이 마레스 받은 남시 대지고야 마레스 밤에제다 받은 남시 저거 대지고야 마레스 디가야 중앙 전부 시기 아니 뉴베 떡기 아니 통메 루 아니 미시풍비 루 tulun 거스 더 수풍보 더 무수지르베 텐데스 수주풍보 디내가 수쟁이 최대 수주풍보제 디내가 수예되베 한 초와다 누셰다 누제다 남시 시부디 민기풍보제 한 풍봉아 도스체네 주변 거야레스 어떤데 숨고야 이 말에 다디 내가 찔이야잖아 풍부 주당 거치래 기시 토마 주당 거치래 내가 현직이 셰베이나 다 유랑 뇌네 따던자네 디레스 제네 녀야 매다바 핀주 초점나 때네 아니 두고여바 때네 두고여 때네 두고여 마트 라와와기 아니 나이 풍부스나 라와와지 도도지 도스네 토마니네 두메바 대모 되는 게 요래 나오 대가이.
So when the intermediate state being enters into the womb of the mother, let's say the person is taking a rebirth as a human being, isn't it? So that embryo, as it develops over time, it is called by different names. For example, in the first week, that embryo is called an Abuddha embryo. Okay, so that is like the body, isn't it? The body that it's formed initially. When one takes one is conceived in the womb, isn't it? So as I mentioned earlier on, the intermediate state being must have accumulated the karma, must have the karmic connection with the parents in order to be their child. There must be no faults in the parents' egg and sperm, isn't it? Right? So this the appearance of the embryo in the first week is like rice broth or yogurt scum. So and it is said in the sutra that this primitive embryo clearly manifests the solidity of the earth element, the moistness of the water element, the heat of the fire element, and the mobility of the wind element. Yeah. So you know, if yogurt is not milk, but if you stir, with a spoon or if you're using a machine, if you stir the yogurt, if you churn it, what you get at the end of the day is butter, isn't it? Right? So what I think here is that this example shows that the analogy is basically showing that the being, the body of the body that one has during the first week of after conception is not something that comes about just from the egg and sperm of the parents alone. Neither is it established from the consciousness of the intermediate state being alone. Neither is it established just from the coming together of the egg and sperm of the parents and the intermediate state being's consciousness. The four great elements are involved as well. So we are talking about these elements existing at the very subtle level. Yeah. So earlier on I mentioned, isn't it, that earth element performs the function of solidifying. Then the water element has the feature of moistness and so forth. Yeah, isn't it? So all of these must come together in order for for the body to be formed. So of course, in the first week, it is just in the form of an embryo, isn't it? But nevertheless, this physical embryo is essentially the aggregate of form out of the 5 aggregates. And in the 12 links, you have the link of name and form, isn't it? So the link of form here refers to this embryo during the first week of conception. Yeah? And then, of course, that body develops over time, isn't it? Then the link of name refers to the rest of the aggregates. Yeah, you have the aggregate of feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and the aggregate of consciousness. Yeah. So if we look at it, if we look at this explanation, yes, it is an explanation of how birth takes place. It is an explanation of the birth state. It is an explanation of how the physical body is first established, how it is formed. But it is also indirectly, if you look at it, it is an explanation of how the body is something that does not arise the body is not something that arises kind of from its own side or inherently, isn't it, right? So the body is something that is dependently arisen, right? The body is that which is dependently arisen from the mere aggregation and the mere coming together of these various factors, like the presence of a non-faulty egg and sperm, and the karma to be born as the child of that couple, and the presence of the intermediate state beings consciousness, and the presence or the existence of the gathering of the four great elements. Yeah. So without the mere aggregation of these factors, you will not have the body.
היא לא מתקיימת בלתי תלויה, אלא בסופו של דבר אפשר לומר שהיא מתויגת, היא רק מתויגת על ידי שם בלבד. במובן הזה שמאחר ולידה היא תלויה בכל הדברים האלה שהזכרנו, היא תלויה במצרף הברדו, היא תלויה בהורים, היא תלויה בקרמה, היא תלויה באיסוף, במפגש הזה של כל היסודות, זה אומר שהיא לא מתקיימת, לא מתרחשת מעצם עצמה, בכוח עצמה, בצורה בלתי תלויה, אלא אנחנו מבינים שלידה מתרחשת כהתהוות בתלות. היא מתרחשת בתלות, לדוגמה, בגורמים בתנאים וכולי. לעשולה.
תתנה הנג'ופי תיגדוה, תיג'ינדנה, גאו דתתס, פרנה צעngom보다, 발랑기 지워다, 여슈다 숄라테네, 소소네 심부께와 귤라스, 다 당부코란에 심부여 말했을 텐데 당부코란에 두두반에 심부승이디야 도체 두대지 말아왔어. 다 델라 때네 껴가 요지러봤어. 레레난도 심부 미미까 유단 겐기 똑기 심부 껴가 요르데 심부 대다 깨바나 소소네 땡 치다와 신도스 땡 치다와 신도스 나타 당부디 짜당스 짜라 때네 디 때네 깨베 심부도 몬보 다 때네 발랑 지월 때네 깨샤베 심부도 서보 땐 야슈르 때네 깨샤베 심부도 마르보 쇼르 때네 깨샤베 심부도 까르보 카도양 민다치 예데바 다 다가나시 지기 디 땡기 깨나 때네 두베 깨 땡텔라 때네 아니 고 소자테야 카도다 입다 도저 민다 용도에 텐데 두아스 틴 두베 깨 생인데바스 다 디펠샤네 대신도 파메 미장월에 륜디 깨바야 깨남기 난도 째나 미바 민귤 메티스 다 바드남시 디나네 베나 미루 nye 투마레 다 파메 감감하기 되네 미루 nye 투마레 마레 되는 듀발레 때네 베나 메이 멤버체 추이 듀블체 룽기 펠버체 안 사인 즘버체 어든지기 중원첨부시기 저와도 든지 지기도와 든지 깬 트래블 때네 다 대야 갑다 두다 든지 토네 아니 파마찌기 젤 때네 주셔베 부대야 갑을 빡빡 갑을 차여도 갑이야 군자 파지마지 이네야 갑을 빠빠 나게 차여도도 단 카돌라야 민다 여도도 든지 용구도와 깬 뒤베 투다 마체바야 루양답을 렘바 민규로 륜디 깨나 파메 중어첨부 시다 모니 타미테 par 줄테스 데다데 사이 감기는 사이 자와체도 주의 감는 시의 자와체도 메이 감는 조의 자와체도 룽기 감는 양시의 자와체도 메르메비 류타 갈때 사감 버식다 데나 추가 매버 균난 데다데 페나 체다 타와감부 장보신도 누르미도가 요로스 어디래 단단히 근데 단단히 뉴베 깬사야기 중어태야 아니 중어르르야 네바 여르베스나 요마레스 디 아야 데베 시가바나나 숭구도와 누가 매베 중군을 속바시자 깬유데스 ngawa namla deoshe nabakundu merisos 다 중어사 지고려야 아니 가야 펜을 제투야기 자와 제투 네바지 요마레스 다 펜은 제트 상에도 펜을 생에 되게 아니 중어 정부 시대 처벌 때는 중어지레스 말한수 루보디야 처벌 때는 중어지레스 중어 정부 시 처벌 때는 중어지레스 이내야 중어 정부 시대 아니 도고레베스나 도고 말레스 근데 지기지가 미tum바 바시레스 매다 추니 미tum바 바시레 룽단 사다도서 미tum바 바시레 도스 전에 미tum바 바시 지때 펜준 찬연바 지급갑라 아니 고 중어디야 가서 루보트 펠셋 중어시 처벌할 때는 루보트 펠셋 차민연바 중세지 중어가는 아니 루보 구셋 아니 룰라 나사셋 어디인자 가와 남라 데오시에 나바군도 메리소스 tam 냠렌지를 자는 셰인도 말로부 대단히 있어야지 단대 중어 첨부 시 인도에 텐데기 르데 중어 미tumba 시고데 차냠도 대 잠식라 에네 대화시 타니 따버려 마도 찌기 아니 모니기 대화 짜는 말다스 가르스마 중어 첨부 시데 미tumba로 와스 미tum바 갈와치 에나 대화사지 용도 걸어요 말 디인자 동아베는 신을 만들어버렸어야 돼 두스레스네 동에도 뭐도치도 두스는 것도 와
Okay, next, Rinpoche read out some passage from Sutra, which I do not have the hard copy with me, but essentially, this I think Rinpoche was talking about Simbu is like, I think, I'm not sure, sounded like a different kind of insects. Different kind of insects have different shapes or different colors due to the because of the various factors. Yeah. So point is like what she was trying to make is that the body is a result of the aggregation or the coming together of many factors. Yeah. So many causes and conditions must come together, isn't it? Right. So as previously stated, so there is the presence of the egg and sperm from of the father and mother. Then on the basis of which together with the presence of the consciousness of the intermediate state being and the karma and so forth, then one enters the womb, the consciousness enters into the fertilized egg, so to speak, isn't it? Right. So so if you were to but is there something that we can point to that is the body of a human, for example? So is the body the fertilized egg? Is the body the human body the egg of the mother individually? No. Is it the sperm of the father individually? No. Then is it the fertilized egg? Is also individually is not, isn't it? Right. So because as I mentioned earlier on, the four great elements existing at the very subtle level, those must be present as well. Right? They must come together, and before before the body can be formed, so to speak, in the womb, or before conception can take place, isn't it? Right. So due to the differences in these various factors, for example, the differences in the four great elements, you have babies born of different skin color. Even though a child might be born from the same parent, yeah, but he or she might have a slightly different color tone from his or her siblings, isn't it? Right. So point here is that this physical body of ours, starting with the embryo in the mother's womb, is an aggregation, basically is a composite of these four great elements, at the very subtle level: the earth, water, fire, and wind, isn't it? Right. So right. So there is no real independently existing body, so to speak. The body is that which is dependently arisen. And then as for these four elements, if you look at them, these four great elements individually, they are by nature, they contradict one another by nature. They're not naturally in harmony, isn't it? Like fire and water diametrically opposed, isn't it? And so forth, right? So only when the elements, these elements, we're talking about elements at the subtle level, are in equilibrium, where they are kind of in balance, only then can we feel well physically, and only then can the body develop, and only then can the body grow. yeah, and strengthen and so forth. If these elements are not in balance, they are not in a state of equilibrium, then the body will degenerate physically, and then that's why also we will fall sick. Yeah. So if you have to apply this understanding, this information to practice, usually, I mean, conventionally, we do say, there are times when we feel kind of physically well, and then we say that I'm well, I'm feeling good, isn't it, right? But then we have to understand that, this is not a real kind of state of real happiness, so to speak, isn't it? Because why? The reason is that the four elements are by nature opposed to one another. They're not harmonious by nature, isn't it? Right. So as soon as these elements are in a state of imbalance, not in a state of equilibrium, then you feel unwell, you feel sick, you fall sick, and so forth. Yeah? So it shows that our body is in the nature of suffering. Yeah.
לגרום להתפתחות. בכל מקרה, פה בסוטרה הזאת, הבודה אומר, יסוד האדמה מתפקד כמוצקות, יסוד המים מתפקד כלחות או רטיבות, יסוד האש מתפקד כחום, ויסוד הרוח הוא גורם או מתפקד כתנועה. עכשיו, אם לגוף שנוצר, שהוא בשלב הראשוני הוא גוף קרומי, זה אומר שבביצית שהופרטה, החלק החיצוני הוא נראה כמו קרום. אם בגוף הקרומי הזה יהיה רק יסוד האדמה, ללא יסוד המים, זה יהיה כמו לאחוז ביד בחול ואבק שהם יבשים, בלי יכולת לרכך אותם. אם יהיה להם רק את יסוד המים, ללא יסוד האדמה, הם יהיו כמו שמן או נוזל, שמנוניים מרטבים, בלי יכולת להתמצק, להפוך להיות גוש מוצג, הם יזלגו או הם ייפרדו. אז בעצם מה שאנחנו אומרים פה זה שגוף הוא נלקח, הוא נוצר בתלות בארבעת היסודות הגדולים, בתלות באיסוף בהם, ולא בתלות ברק אחד מהם בלבד, בצורה בלעדית. אפשר לומר ארבעת היסודות האלה הם לא תואמים אחד את השני, אבל עדיין כשהם משתלבים ביחד הם יכולים להשתלב באיזון מסוים. ואריה דיבר על זה ב-400 הבתים של דרך האמצע, והוא דיבר על זה שכל אחד מהיסודות לא יכול לתפקד בצורה בלעדית לבד, אבל על ידי השילוב או האיגוד של היסודות האלה אנחנו מקבלים תוצאות של טובות, תוצאות חיוביות או תוצאות שליליות. זה אומר שאם אנחנו נחשוב על תוצאות לא יכולות לבוא לכדי קיום רק בתלות ביסוד האדמה או יסוד המים לבדם, אלא רק בשילוב של ארבעת היסודות האלה. אז כשאנחנו משלבים את מה שאריה אמר בתרגול שלנו, אז לדוגמה בתרגול האישי אנחנו יכולים לחשוב לעצמנו שכרגע המצב שלי הוא טוב, אני בריא, אני מרגיש טוב, אבל כשאני מרגיש טוב ואני בריא, זה אומר שאני בריא כי ארבעת האלמנטים, ארבעת היסודות, הם עכשיו משולבים בצורה שהיא מאוזנת. ואם האיגוד הזה או הצירוף של ארבעה יסודות הוא לא יהיה מאוזן, זה אומר שמאחר והם לא תואמים אחד את השני והאיזון הזה יופר, אז אני לא ארגיש טוב, המצב שלי לא יהיה טוב. זה אומר שבעצם אני לא מרגיש טוב, אני לא מתקיים בצורה שבה אני מרגיש טוב, בצורה עצמאית, בלתי תלויה, אלא זה מתקיים ככה בתלות בדברים אחרים, לדוגמה, בתלות ביסודות הגדולים. וכתוצאה מזה אנחנו גם יכולים להבין שבעצם גם אם כרגע המצב שלנו מצב טוב, זה אומר שהוא לא טוב בצורה מעצם טבעו או בצורה עצמאית, אלא בתלות בדברים אחרים, ולכן עדיין אפשר לומר שמאחר ובשלב שבו היסודות כבר לא יהיו מאוזנים, אנחנו נחווה סבל, אז בעצם המצב שלנו כרגע הוא מצב של סבל, המצרפים שלנו הם עדיין בטבע הסבל. לסולה.
Tene sange 좀 된데기 가올이야 빼찍 자르는 것도와 빼나 사베 마냠바 다시 빼는 디레 루사벤지 데이터가 요나래 네터가 요나래 도터가 요나래 신동터가 요나 신도터가 요나 루이 사베 마냠바 딘데지티 네사 추루 차장 찬데서 사질이야 아니 사변티 드림 때문에 드림 묘도서 찾아게제 아니 리부밍르베스 제 가올 간는 것도 어때 민기 말했슈도 고 링기 아니 중화식 누발라 때네 아니 림기 펠네 베트다는 다와징이 고르스그레 로징이 고르스그레 도스체네 아니 리부밍바 제용고 두아스 베티나 신체네 바토와티 마이 응안도 인성 자가네 제제 아니 샤부 둔라네 아니 교환도레스 다와나 둔라 담보도 간데지 요레스 제인도 던데디 슈 둔게 십시나라 숭고도와 아니 쇼 마차 바단라스 다ben 쇼 차바이나 가르보지 요르와 탁보르지 요르와 쇼 마차 바들라고지도와 쇼 마차 바단라와 던데지기 아니 던데디 민수 풍고지 다 드레스 데네 둔다 찌기 제데라야 에니 쇼차바던다와 딘데기 에니 다 디나르 예베 마이 ngal나 예베 에니 중화첨부 시 예베 에니 쇼카와 마르캬바던다데스 누르노르고 시에자베 에니 루디 다 차레스 둔다 찌기 제라 누어텐데 두그레스 티숭고도와 다 데네 둔다 숨바티입니다. 둔다 숨바텔라 에네 마이 ngal도 다 종아첨부 시다 쪼롱거 떡기 누르노보 가임바드 타르기 책신 따르따고 제베 다 따르따고 승인데 언티체 임네 매둥 뚱부다와 퉁신 충신 에네 나긴난도 어때 텐데지 따르따고선 나나르데 지여 댕지 어텐데스 용그레스 매둥 임네 매둥에 뚱부다와 퉁신 충데스 다 tumbudrawa mendo tendeji isare tendeji yungres ta tene sha dunda shibala mai ngal na neba ti ane ta jungwa chimbu shi nube to girimgi pelne tene ti yipti chibudrawa sta gogodrawa chigi chigi yungundwa chibusana gogodrawa chigare nandu rabdu jungwa chimbu shi tarki pewa chedos 어디바든지 따르따고 강인 바테네 창원 규르체 창원 체베스 디밍을 창규르세 다니에도 따네 눈다 두바들 창규르시에 다니에 따네 아니 입도 간데지 얼스나 고르치 어든지 용그레스 치고다와테스 난도 저 rab도 저 중화 정부시 터키 페와체도스
ואז הבודה בסוטרה הזאת הוא נותן עוד משל, עוד דוגמה לדרך שבה יצור
So in the sutra, the Buddha gave an example of a seed. It could be a seed of it could be barley seed, rice seed, and so forth. So the seed must not have deteriorated. It's fresh, but in order for the seed to grow, it needs earth, water, fertilizer, and so forth. And even if all these conditions are present, but it doesn't mean that the seed will germinate within a day and then produce a plant all within a day, isn't it? Right? But it takes the process takes time. So depending on the type of plant involved, isn't it? Right? But the process takes time. Is the seed will germinate gradually over time and then slowly develop into a plant. It could take weeks. It could take a month. It could take a year. Right? But basically, for the seed, when the seed grows, it happens due to the power of the four elements, isn't it? So likewise, it's the same with the development of the embryo in the mother's womb after conception, right? So in the first week, the embryo is called an abuddha embryo, and its appearance is like rice broth or yogurt scum. So yogurt scum is like basically a yogurt in a very liquid form. It's not like thick yogurt. Yeah. Then in the second week, that embryo is then called Kalala embryo. And in the second week, the embryo, the appearance of the embryo is like thick curd or congealed butter. And in the third week, the embryo develops as before, and now it is called a basin embryo, and the shape is oblong, And in the sutra, it is said that its appearance is like an iron spoon or worm or entrails, yeah. And then in the fourth week, so in during the third week, so the sutra says, since it internally incubates and fully incubates for 7 days, the four elements more clearly manifest. So as the four elements, as the power of the four elements increases, then the embryo develops as well. So in the fourth week, the embryo develops as before, and now it is called, the Ghana embryo. Yeah? So and it is the shape of this Ghana embryo is like a clod of earth or pestle. Yeah. So.
אז בשבוע הראשון נקרא השלב הקרומי. עכשיו בשבוע השני לשהות העובר ברחם, ככה זה מתואר בסוטרה הזאת, הארוחות של הקרמה עוברות, ורוח מעודנת מאוד שנושבת משמאל וימין לצלעות האם, היא מביאה להופעה הדרגתית של סימני גוף, עובר שמתפתח ברחם האם הוא הופך למשהו שדומה ליוגורט סמיך או לחם עקרה. אז קודם כל בשלב הקודם, בשלב הקרומי הראשון היה כרוב שהתפתח על פני השטח, ובפנים זה היה עדיין נוזלי. בשבוע השני הוא מתחיל להפוך להיות סמיך, כמו יוגורט סמיך מאוד, או חמאה שהיא חמאה קרה. הוא מתפתח בתוך הרחם ובתהליך של הבשלה, הוא הופך לגוף שהוא סגלגל או ביצי. זה אומר שהוא מקבל איזושהי צורה שהיא לא עגולה ככדור, אלא שהיא סגלגלה או ביצית, ככה שבצורה הזאת היסודות בהדרגה מביאים אותו לכדי קיום. בשבוע השלישי, שוב באמצעות הרוחות האלה של הקרמה, הגוף הזה שהוא סגלגל או ביצי הוא מתקשר, הוא מתגבש והוא מקבל צורה שהיא יותר מעורכת. בסוטרה זה מתואר בתור צורה שהיא דומה לאלי, כמו שאנחנו משתמשים במחדש ואלי, אז הוא הולך ומתגבש למשהו שנראה כמו אלי שמשתמשים בו לדוגמה במכשיר לקטישת תרופות. אז הוא קצר וקטן עדיין בשלב הזה, והוא מתפתח ברחם עד התפתחות מלאה, כאשר 4 היסודות הגדולים מפתחים אותו, גורמים לו להתפתחות הדרגתית. בשבוע הרביעי הגוף הסגלגל הזה מתעבה, והוא מקבל צורה שהיא כמו של אבן רחיים שמשמשים בה לטחון זרעים או מה שזה לא יהיה, הוא מקבל צורה של אבן רחיים, ובשבוע החמישי מתרחשת התגבשות שהיא יותר שלמה. עכשיו מה שהגוף מתחיל להשתנות ומתחילות לצאת כאלה בליטות התפתחו לגוף שיש לו ידיים ורגליים, ככה שבעצם היה לנו מין דבר שהוא עגול או כדורי או ביצתי, הוא מתחיל להסתעף, בליטות מתחילות לצאת, בליטות של הגפיים וכולי, הוא מקבל את הסימנים של שתי הירכיים שהתפתחו והכתפיים והראש, זה כמו גדילה של ענפים ועלי כותרת בעץ בתקופת הגשם של עונת הקיץ. בשבוע השישי להיותו ברחם, הגדילה הזאת, ההתפתחות הזאת ממשיכה, הוא מקבל את הסימנים של האמות, של השוקיים וכולי, לסולה.
Excuse me, Rinpoche? Can we have the question and answers session now? Questions? Is okay?
What time is we are stop?
12:30. Now it's 12. 30 minutes question and answer is okay?
근데 rinpoche 단다 추주 제가 열에서.
야야. 제 엔가 티시 셰기스.
그래서 rinpoche רוצה Rinpoche would like to continue for some time, so let's hold off with the questions.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. That dunda shiba tangjul sayati and shabu dunda ngabati kablaya and kala jua sen ngog sajat burtche lagwagi sajat burtchi and kangwag sajat burtche and the burts ngambunga in tengi imbare hotel tangjurus the shabu dunda ngabatela or tenji pungbani dongo sama ngon jo chetos that shabu dunda tubatela and 중화친구 시다 룽다 조룽 떡기 아니 디링루 친제 라바다 고다 깡바다 도종원세 더줘야지 쟁아니 카인 바테네 참만나바 시 셰차오스 디체 다테네 샤부 둔다 둠바텔레야 에네 라페티다 깡베티다 디네 도조 세르루여버체 에네 샤부 둔다 게바텔레야 아니 중화친구 시 누베 또 디톱기 아니 처만 이슈탐바 용구르스다 거 당산 이슈어스 라바다 강베 소모 엔 조강가 두스치야 게임구르스 어디인자 라베 소모 주 강베 소모 주 어도조 에니 세르두르스 딩 용구르스 에니 샤부 둔다 고바텔레야 에니 룽구톱기 다인 존 중화친구 시 떡기레 데니 당산 구여르스 미니티체 나와니티체 나니티체 나훈니티체 카체 샹와체 지와체 어네 카인바티 엔 코란 지 당선으로도 상마 다지 무르츠체제 다 되는거레스 에네 샤두라 주바티나리아 에네 카리오르스나 에네 꾸네 고체베 룽티기 떡기 에네 디 루프베 루군도 계시 다 근데 지 온보다 두조 지 되다부 두조 야 계시 카머체데스 안까바 푸카오나 시체레스 에니 샤부둔다 주지발라 에네 나나 네바티 에네 간데 지운거스나 지다 초라용거스 랭가 미가와 에네 로와다 디노와다 두바다 냐와다 엔 두조 쿠조자 두조 용거스 지 강바 껴야다 강바 부조 자야다 강라 껴야다 두조용 그래스 나 샤부둔다 중이 바텔라 에네 다 집로 예외 나라 예외 규마 체중 다 규마다 에네 테레 다 두조야 에네 부담 두조야 깨기여입니다 대체 시야 부개버체도스 다 샤부둔다 죽숨바 텔라 인 가블가 카코메 두시키레스 매 수시 통베로 진예바다 류기 내다 대외 경고 용수 진제 아니 마이 칼라세샤버디 대외 경고는 야 두세 주제 타바도 티는 야 주제 대지 초완용하지 저거 잡았다 저거 또 봤다 근데 초완용 여행 말아 다 근데 인그레스 다 샤고둔다 주시바텔라 되네 kubbe go shebe digi lungu topgi ene zagyu zada gyuba gubja kene lugin dunda yapda i normal yobar chedos ta zagyu tuso ta chi sobda dom chazare ta zagyu tuso gegres ani shabu dunda chongaba dinalya ene zar gyuba nishu kene sawada tongwe ro khaimbe zandiri shune lula pendobar chedos za tizu nanglia legalene ene pendobar ingres that nishu kanshina lugin dunda gyabda yin rerela ya za nga yedes za deda rerela ya za chamu yenla shibju yedes ganga domba ina ene dandari giti na chireta za giti lugin dunda yebe za niti lugi gyabla yebe za niti lugi yunchola yebe za niti lugi lechola yebe za niti dadala ya za ten yenla chamu ene ya geje chechawa giti lutele gyabla chedos da tendere da tene shabudunda juju ane ta peje lubut chazan tuk za tuzu chazan tuk kayo goda mingda nyingbu koro kuyi buka gubo teta namba chene u chenandu gyuwa tongwa da odu gyushi tongwa meba da sawada tongwa suishi tongwa kanyiba teta kya lula pendoba chi yungres da tene shabudunda judun bate la ene lungti da toki mingi kundu tangwa da migde sebucha nawa de sebucha kan raji dawa ina melona ya shakti goya deba jiyena ko ene taje gi zegi pa jije ene melon sebucha ba nashi o tinde da wongbo tuzo seji deba o tinde siyungres ene shabudunda joje batela ene da mingone sing da cha di inje dela micha bache ene dimen shabudunda joje ne da jidan shabu sumju sobje dunda sumju sobje redwa o shabu joje menche da 미기 초 차상 여대버지 어 딘디지 그래서 제제 어디 숨고 여인 말에 다 드네마 랍데 뭐와체 어디 지 등산 장시 때지 가면 숨바에 말에 어 루부샤제 단 가면 숨바에 말에 어다 갑 대다 디 둘이야 아니 디신 시베기 아니 루브네 단 로탄다 되게 마지 숨바 되게 남베 체리 로탄레스나 독스여 대지래 다 되네 남베 따르고 도탄체나 바르도지 마이나도 슈단 도스레 마이나는 루페단 도스레 제네 딘데디 남베 따르고 안다 디규디 귤레녀레 도스 충벌스 남베 따르고 다 남베 체리 남베 따르고 아니 남베 냠레레 잔 셰윤도 다 육군주 덴바 레녀레 리부 둥엔 덴바 중당 도스첸 중국이 와르스 다디 코 타제도 제고 여바이나 아니 대트 된 독제기 람기 데 먹는도 되고 건네 고베 담바 승인들이 시와 찬는 바 타바 승인들 디시 정도 그런 바 들러라고 그랬어요 단된 디기 도티기 내가 다 디숨도 와 먼저 첨부르지 나라는 딘들지 통스 다 기부 차단 그런 바다 또 실시로 시부지 승부도와 바로 죽당 그런 거 세부 딘데지 승부도 왔어 모르지 어떠신 남배 체리도다 남배 따두고도다 남배 냠랭도다 어떻게 세부 쇼승도 왔어 모르지 총스 드린데샤 다 저저레이
rinpoche ngala kandichi yu di tsaseya di la kabdila chaksa lagirbe yama tsachidan chene tsara lagire
다 마란조 단데데 디발에 tsachi도와 어데통다야 어딜
oh yeah she's in the chaksa lasso okay אז דיברנו על השבוע הרביעי
We continue with a brief description of the development of the baby in the mother's womb. So in the fifth week, due to a wind called the perfect gatherer arising within the mother's womb, then the protuberances of the two shoulders, the two thighs, and the head appears. Yeah. Okay. Then in the sixth week, due to a wind called great expanse arising in the mother's womb, and together with the development of the four elements, then the limbs, the hands, basically the four limbs, the two hands and the two legs, becomes more clearly defined. Then in the 7th week, due to a wind called circulator arising within the mother's womb, then the two then the hands and the two hands and the two legs further develop. Basically, So that anyway, we just said that he didn't give much detail. So during the 8th week, due to wind, it's called that which stops and transforms. Then the 10 toes and the 10 fingers become manifest. So they become kind of defined, clearly defined. Then during the 9th week, due to wind called the specific separator arising within the mother's womb, then nine features appear. What are these 9? The 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the 2 nostrils, the mouth, the orifice for excrement, and the orifice for urine. Then in the 10th week, a wind called solidifier arises within the mother's womb, and because of that, then the body of the embryo residing in the womb becomes firm and stable. Then in the 11th week, a wind called appearances or orifices arises in the mother's womb, and due to that, the internal openings are produced within the body, and the 9 orifices, such as the 2 eyes and so on, are created. And then also, I think we should say there's the now we're the 11th week, isn't it? There is movement of the legs and the hands. Then in the 12th week, due to a wind called a crooked gate arising in the mother's womb, then in the 12th week, I think we should say the intestines and the colon, the bowels form. Then in the 13th week, because of the power of two winds, the baby in the mother's womb comes to know hunger and thirst. So any nutrients derived from what is consumed by the mother, so benefit the body of the baby via the umbilical cord, of course. Then in the 14th week, due to a wind called the tip of thread arising within the mother's womb, then sinews starts to develop in the body. So there are 250 that exist in front of the body, 250 in the back of the body, 250 exist in the right of the body, and 250 existing in the left of the body. So according to the sutra. So in the 15th week, a wind called lotus arises within the mother's womb. And then you have also the development of the channels, the channels, and then within the channels there's the movement of the subtle energies or the winds in those channels. So altogether there are about 80,000 channels. So how do you get these 80,000? There are 20,000 types of channels in the front of the body, 20,000 in the back, 20,000 in the right of the body, 20,000 in the left of the body. Okay. Then in the 16th week, I think the baby starts to breathe, so to speak. There is the internal movement of the breath of the fetus. Then in the 17th week, basically the sense faculties become clear, such as the eye and the ear sense faculties, they become clear. Okay. Then in the 18th week, that's according to Buddhist terminology, we say that baby now is now officially like a human. So in the weeks prior to the 18th week, so basically from the moment of conception up to the end of the 17th week, so that process is a process in which the baby is the kind of developing, as a human, and then from the 18th week, the person is considered to be or it's called given or referred to as having become a human, right? So you have to understand that that this teaching was given by the Buddha, and back in those days, there wasn't any technology such as invasive microscopes, or neither was there the practice of cutting up the body and examining it, isn't it, right? But nevertheless, the Buddha was able to explain all of this, and Rinpoche said he finds this kind of amazing. Yeah. So in this sutra, you see, there's a lot of very detailed teachings on this whole process. Yeah. So, and the whole process that is described in the sutra is what we call Buddhist science. Then, on the basis of the Buddhist explanation of the physical process of birth and the development of the fetus and so forth, then on top of that, then we we add in the Buddhist philosophy, isn't it, right? For example, according to Buddhist philosophy, we have a way of explaining how there's the intermediate state being, and then the intermediate state being has to enter into the mother's womb, and in order for the intermediate state being to enter into the mother's womb, there must be many conditions coming together, such as karma. So these are all fall under the category of Buddhist philosophy. And on the basis of this Buddhist science and Buddhist philosophy, then for us Buddhists, we have the Buddhist practice. So so as I mentioned earlier on, this body is in nature of suffering. Birth and cyclic existence is suffering. So true suffering is what we want to get rid of. And true suffering arises from its cause, which is true origins. So if we want to be liberated from such an conditioned existence, if we want to be free from cyclic existence, then we have to cultivate the antidote. We have to cultivate a true path, on the basis of which then we will be able to achieve true cessation. So this is the part of the Buddhist practice. Yeah. Of course, if you are interested in the details, as I mentioned earlier on at the beginning of the session, right? Many of the passages in this sutra, the sutra, Nanda's sutra of entering the womb, has been translated, and you can find it in the book called Science and Philosophy, Volume 1. Science and Philosophy in the Indian Buddhist Classics, Volume 1. And the development of the embryo in the mother's womb is detailed in chapter 27. Chapter 26 has the description of the birth process and some information on the intermediate state and so forth. ורימפוצ'ה אומר שכשהוא מסתכל על השיעורים האלה, הוא מוצא אותם כשיעורים מופלאים. מופלאים כמדע בודהיסטי, מופלאים כפילוסופיה בודהיסטית, מופלאים בדרך שבה הם מעשירים את התרגול הבודהיסטי שלנו. הם מוסברים בצורה כל כך בהירה וכל כך מפורטת, וזה באמת מעשיר את הנפש. לאסונה. אוקיי, אז בואו נעבור לשאלות ולתשובות. Time for question and answer.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now have the session. The question will be asked by the respective language assistant. Please note that as there are many questions and time is very short, we will probably not be able to answer all questions. So I'd like to start with a question from the Hebrew-speaking audience. Maya, please, can you read the first question?
Thank you very much, Rinpoche. Thank you for these precious teachings. So our questions, the first one is the questions regarding the causes of entering the womb. So what is the substantial cause? Is it the consciousness that enter in the womb? Are the cooperative conditions what will store the consciousness?
The cooperative conditions are? Sorry?
What will store the consciousness?
What will store the consciousness? Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay. 다 Rinpoche kanji resena dila Bardo pumbo di ngala jugbetse gyutan kenda tene jugira walas. Ani dila gyu dila nyalengi gyutan leche checkingi gen yorwala. Ani chezan kanji di karesena nyalengi gyu karina nyalengi gyu sheba Shagirves ani Lenchi Chekin dila Sheba Nyarsa Shaksa Shebeten then the Shagirves Kandichinas.
Tagiti Gaungan Jugundo Tine Ma Sundan del Tebeina and Nyelendi Party number Shevati Yimbadochi. Tene that tea candy Pamedzeti. 현지 체계 밤에제 밤에제들라 아니 파르덴남시티 고 밤에제티 진제 아니 고 누구도 패고 위에 인자 고 파르덴남시기 아니 파 미수지르고 풍부 tru사티 아니 밤에제될 때는 두고 위에 인자 아니 현지 체계인데 밤에제티체 아니 뉴베 겐생인데 종아치 무시티체 어떤 데스 체제 숨도와
So she said his understanding is like this if he's not wrong. The substantial cause is the consciousness of the intermediate state being. The cooperative condition the cooperative conditions are, for example, the egg and sperm of the parents. Because the intermediate state being has to hold, also literally to hold or to take on the egg, the fertilized egg in it, isn't it? Because the fertilized egg or the ovum is that which is the basis for actualizing the link of name and form out of the 12 links, isn't it? Right? But then there is also what we call the the condition of gathering and the condition of coming together, and this refers to the existence or the presence of the four great elements.
밤에 semje shengi zerwas 밤에 semje shengi zejire 수께와 랭거스 소소레 아니 소소께와 뭐만 내 용지 만들니 수를 받은 남시들에 어디 밤에 제지 semje shengi zej일 때네 텐지 체계는 때네 본부터 들어버릴 텐데 진도 또 사병 최디 남시들에 줄루 주식 최디 밤에 제들에 아니 종아치 무시들에 도시입니다.
The person who is taking rebirth obviously is the intermediate state being, isn't it? Right. So, so in the analogy of the seed and the fertilizer and the water, so the seed is analogous of the intermediate state being, and in particular, I mean, there is the consciousness of the being. Or that's going to take rebirth, right? And that intermediate state being enters into the fertilized egg, isn't it, right? And the fertilized egg are basically material substances belonging to somebody else other than the intermediate state being who is taking rebirth, isn't it? literally is the material substance of belonging of somebody else's continuum, isn't it? So the water, the fertilizer, and the 4 great elements and so forth are analogies of the egg and sperm of the parent.
Yeah. Definition that.
שאלה הבאה.
Yes. We will now receive a question from the English-speaking audience. So for this question, I will ask May, if you can please read the question.
Hello, Rinpoche. It is said by Ansanga that the intermediate state can be changed by a very powerful positive virtue. How is very powerful virtue defined? How is this created? What preconditions are needed? Thank you.
rinpoche bagachila ngumba koma dila bardo gyo ayores tende sondwa bardo gene gyo ayores 제산 다 gyo joina di keminda shedwa pena gyo top chembola ten gyo ayores 아니 노바 게와 노바 슈크쳔보 딜라 게와 칸데칸데치 인고 그레스 게와디 칸데치 두고 그레스 켄 카레를 때네 용 그레스
오
칸데디레
딱 디저트디 딱 차시 차를 집에 때는 배윤두 치셈 룸마텐 차다 마차 승행다 오딱 치셈 개발이 주야 요메 세다 다 때네 파트 남시 티야 지 가르서래 개회 바자게 유한 로다만도 생긴데 리벨 남네 제바체네 안 타르타르마 따인도 유한 로야 여데버지 딘데 체네 안 지 몽보마 지 팅맹이 둔다니 셔야 몽보 공마 틱쟁이 둔다니 장주스메 되네네 수야 안에 다 되네 상하기 흉내 수야 어떠서 강갈이야 아니 민다민다 여대야티 딱고 리베 진네 타도 사브루 조인도 아니 샤바타 노지 텐데레 상고도 아니 치승 참모 개화강도야요 나가로 숨으로와 딘데기 개발을 상고도 다 규센터와 딘데지래 다 가도 될래야 지 겨톱 첨부 사야기 겨톱 첨부 사야디 치제기 겨톱 첨부지 유그래라 조조디 난기sem기 겨톱 첨레 난기sem기 겨와들야 에네 지 랑기 이나레 셴기 이나레 오랑 카야롱아 지기 운웅이 개발 에너지 장주sembe 되는 마치 셰베이나 장주sem다 인제 첨보다 딘데기 스메 떡기 개와도 없잖아 거야 딘데로 받아 신기 툴 때문에 개와 용도 가버려 야
So to answer this question, then there are a couple of things we need to sort out using reasoning. So there are a couple of issues that have to be sorted out before we can think about this. So first, the mind at the time of death, is it neutral by nature or not? Can it be transformed into virtue or not? Isn't it, right? So then, of course, as we saw earlier on, with regards to the features and the characteristics and the process of the intermediate state and birth and so forth, there are sometimes there are slightly different assertions according to the lower and higher Abhidharma, isn't it? So the lower Abhidharma essentially its position is that of the Hinayana tenets. the higher Abhidhamma is essentially taught from within the Mahayana perspective. Then, of course, there is also the tantric perspective, isn't it? Right. So I think, with regards to the question about the changing of the intermediate state due to the force of strong virtue, I think mainly, generally, I think we have to think about it from the tantric perspective here, because from the higher Sukha tantric perspective, it is said that the mind at the time of death can be transformed into the entity or into virtue. Yeah, but putting that aside for now, let's say we were to answer the question directly as to what constitutes a powerful virtue that can, change the intermediate state, right? So, of course, I think in general there is a power of external substances, but I think mainly here, when we're talking about powerful virtue, we're talking mainly about generating a powerful mind, isn't it? A powerful virtuous mind, and this we can either generate generate such a virtue by ourselves, or somebody else generating this powerful virtue, right? And if we were to explain this from the Mahayana perspective, then of course, in general, right, any virtue that is done that is influenced or conjoined or tempered with great compassion, or tempered with the mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta, then that virtue becomes extremely powerful. Then, of course, I think there is also the power of the merit field. These are the different factors here that can make a virtue very powerful. Yeah.
הגדול הזה שיאפשר את השינוי הזה. אז אנחנו יכולים, אז כמובן שהפעולה החיובית הזאת, המצב החיובי הזה הוא לא משהו שנוצר על ידי מישהו אחר, אלא זה משהו שנמצא בתוך התודעה, הוא virtue או משהו שהוא פנימי בתוך התודעה. אם נשאל את עצמנו האם הוא נוצר או מופעל על ידי אחרים, או האם הוא נוצר או מופעל על ידי עצמי, זה בעצם תלוי במוטיבציה. עכשיו, אם נסתכל על זה לדוגמה מנקודת המבט של המוטיבציה שבתרגול המהיאנה, אז יש את המוטיבציה של הבודיצ'יטה ושל החמלה, שדרכם אנחנו יכולים לפתח את התודעה החיובית העצומה הזאת, שמשאירה את הרישומים החיוביים העצומים האלה. אז הדברים האלה כמובן שמתרחשים, מבוצעים על ידי עצמי ולא על ידי אחרים. לעשות.
안데들이야 슈자 찍잖아. 다 뭔가 공어 나 두지 아니 카도 찍을 때나 간두여도 버러지. 레데 딱히 간두 많이 봐. 티 잡로려야 아니 지 윤리 넘버 다제자 많이 봐. 시트 넘버 다제기 탑을 도트위하기 아니 따외차 탑도야. 되네 디 갑댕기 줘 창주쌤 어떻게 내지 야창 되네 디간들이야 아니 난기 냠랭기 단데 기름 조름기 냠랭기 된데 네 탑탑로 윤두 아니 단데 준주나를 여대버데 투징아와 링신 까바 남자 텔라 나스게데 년투기 되는 슝네 타직도 나자는 메데니 까샤버데야 창주쌤에 되는 까블라 고바다 캐버jen지요나 나war레 투야지 디 베디 디베켄도 문도 게베켄도 도투야지 아니 나 아까 대외견야 여대버지 도서 내가 된데 있어레스
עכשיו מאחר והזכרנו
So if we look at the explanations that are found in the lower and higher Abhidhamma in the tantric text, no. So if you look at it superficially or at the literal level, it looks like they are contradictory. But it's not necessarily so. You need to understand the the context. Yeah. So as we progress on the path, or if you take on the view of a higher philosophical system, you know, so there are these considerations, right? So, for example, there are methods. So there are teachings in which, you know, the path that is taught, you know, is only an antidote to the afflictive obscurations. But then there are also methods, you know, in which there are antidotes also to the knowledge obscurations, right? And also whether an action is conjoined with bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, or not. Then on top of that, then, you know, in Tantra, in particularly in Higher Sutra Tantra, then there's the path of the generation stage and completion stage. As you see, you know, as you look at the presentation of the Buddhist teachings, you know, from the Hinayana into Mahayana and then into Mahayana Tantra, so, you know, the teachings become increasingly more profound or subtle, so to speak, subtle, right? In that, you know, what is prohibited in the Hinayana collection of scriptures is sometimes allowed in the minor scriptures. Yeah, so there are some exceptions, isn't it? Right. There are ways, there are reasons, if there are reasons to engage in certain actions which are normally considered non-virtuous, because of the presence of certain methods, such as the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, and so forth. Certain exceptions, Buddha gave the bodhisattvas certain exceptions, isn't it, right? So these we have to consider these things here.
טקסטים שונים ומתאימים אותם לתרגול הספציפי שלנו ולמוטיבציה הספציפית. אוקיי, נראה שזמננו תם.
Time is up. Seems like it.
האם זמננו תם?
Yes, unless we will answer one more question or we can finish now. However, Rinpoche, whatever Rinpoche prefers.
Yeah. To answer. Question.
Okay, so we will take one last question for today.
Yes.
So the Chinese and Russian-speaking audience will ask their questions tomorrow. So I will let Maya ask the final question. So Maya, please unmute.
Thank you so much, Rinpoche. So the question is regarding to vitro fertilization. So what is the approach of Buddhism and the view on this matter, on vitro fertilization?
Sorry, I didn't hear it clearly. What is the question? Could you repeat it?
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Yakila?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, so the question is about vitro fertilization. What is the view of Buddhism about this? Because it's more technical than natural, and how does Buddhism...
Or IVF. Sounded like IVF.
Okay, so we're talking about IVF, right? Okay. 아니, rinpoche 텐상 멤버 텐소 보고 잘 체도 맹간라 쿠타 체레타네 보고 쇠게 누바치 녀도아 아니 보고 차단디 란시 마임바체 맹간라 된데치 서스도아 아니 남베출루기 데셰 타와 칸데치나 보고 차단디 칸데치나스 데셰치 요나 메나스
디 저기 가운가 죽은 도대당 겐두 누구 민두 디 밤에 제티 다가라 딱다래 아니 바르도 남시티 텔 슈그레 슈그 깔려야 코란 소남 기차마다 소남이 미차마 디 딱다 요래 데네 코란 팔라 차시 말라 다와디 파망무스 대예베게 좀 감들 코란 투나 용고요래 어두스첸디 남베 최다 가두 짠 두고 말레스 다다 두그레스
So there is no contradiction here with regards to conception via IVF, because first there is the presence of the egg and sperm of the parents from the material substance side, they're present. Of course, there is the consciousness of the intermediate state being. The intermediate state being is around to enter into the fertilized egg or the ovum. And when the intermediate state, the being enters into the fertilized egg, he or she will, that person, it will experience the various signs of entry, right? According to his or her level of merit, isn't it, right? So we talked about those signs early on, and then what about developing attachment? Let's say if it was going to be born as a male, you would develop attachment for the mother and aversion for the father, right? So there's no problem here. Although the actual father and mother are not lying in bed or engaging in sexual intercourse, but due to the hallucination karmic appearance, right, it sees the fertilized egg, right, as the father and mother lying together, and on the basis of which then the intermediate state being develops attachment and aversion. So there's no problem. In essence, there's no problem. There's no contradiction here.
כאן אנחנו מדברים לא על הפריה טבעית אלא הפריה מלאכותית, עדיין רימפוצ'ה אומר שבמידה מסוימת אפשר לומר שהיא לא סותרת את מה שמדובר על מה שהסוטרה אומרת.
가데 찍다 쩐로 찍전년로 지나 단다 가오가 죽은도 티나라 파마니기 감 두잉염도 바바스 나치와 전에 용고 말했어 찍도와 어다 디기다 찍 저바르지 두잉염도 바바스 도와서 근데 찍다 독시 용고 여바이나 다 단데 딩두기 단다디 젤 때네 부차야 돼야 파마니기 제냠도 손에 중고르마도 파마니기 제 나치체니 중야지 여머칸다 파마니기 제데 텐 중고아치레 디 레마도 지기 인지 미지 파마니디 제 파마니다 냠도 여대야지기 어떤지 티버제베 톤 파마니 티버제 심베 톤 용고 같은데 냐바 말에 디 마임바디 쿵가레 열치나 제자베 나나 강긴다 첸 레중마 사지 직지 열에 디페 미시베 누바침보레 가르레스나 참에 세드 파세베 참에 마세베 참에기 레세 아니 마세베 참에기 레체발라 아니 마트 컨디지로 뇌진가스나 다 단당아란츠 트룹싱이 제지를 때네 아니 베나 아마신다지기 제디 아마신다지기 ngalna 주니 아니 부차바이나 다 텐다베기 마세베 참에디 술라 마기 문지 채월 슬라윈드 단데 아메 코과 나리아 소종칭이디 말 자그마레스 참에 중세 말 자그마레 디다 종의 마마스기 차그레스 다 모네 자네기 제드 칸에 중원이바 어디 마디 엔 소한 까바이나 마세베 참에 중그레 강긴 다체 레 중화디 아니 마세베 참에 중사드레스 디세나 마세베 참에 중화레스 어 투두네 아니 로베 이닝게 깝네 딜리아 제바 차장 제차버지레.
Okay, so one there could be a point which could be a potential source of debate. So in the Sutra of Nanda Sutra of Entry into the Womb, it states that both father and mother must not have faulty seed in the sense of either the semen or the blood not descending, or of the one descending before the other, or though they descend together, of either being rotten. So basically, literally saying that one of the conditions is that the father and mother must have engaged in the act of sexual intercourse before the substances can be generated, isn't it, or emitted, or isn't it, right? So, but even then, there is no problem in that although when you try to make a baby from the IVF process, right? So there is no problem of the semen or the egg of the parents not descending at the same time. There's no problem. Why? Because when the scientists bring the two substances together, the egg and the sperm, these two are put together at the same time, isn't it? You have to bring the two together and mix them up, isn't it? So there is no problem as such. Then let me give you an example to state. It's kind of indirect example to show why this is not a problem. So there is the heinous action of killing one's mother, isn't it? Right. So here, in Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge, in his auto commentary, he said, he raises this qualm. So when the Kalala embryo from one woman has been inserted into the womb of another woman, which one is the mother, the killing of whom would constitute a heinous crime? So you have an embryo that has into which intermediate state being has already entered into. So if that embryo is taken from this woman and inserted into the womb of another woman.
Okay.
So anyway, there's no time. Anyway, the answer is on page 350 of Science and Volume 1.
If you can please indicate.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. O powerful Chinbrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain till samsara ends. May the Buddha Dharma flourish and its upholders have long lives. May all sentient beings arise into happiness and the temporal and ultimate goals be fulfilled. Through the merits of these virtuous actions might quickly attain the state of the Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the precious body mind not yet born arise and grow. May the born have no decline but increase more and more. That's all, Rinpoche.
Okay.
So we've come to the end of the first day of the Bardo teaching. I'd like to say thank you very much, Rinpoche, for this precious teaching. Thank you, Rinpoche. Toda. And also thank the interpreters, Venerable Kartsan, Venerable Gyorme, Chenchen Mongush, and Lundup Tonden, sorry. We'll meet again tomorrow, 9 a.m. Israel, Moscow time, or 2 p.m. Mongolia, Singapore, Taiwan time. See you all tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming.